Hey Frag fam, Corbin here again from Northwest Scent. Today I'm going to be talking to you about 10 iconic designer fragrances. So these are fragrances that have just spawned in really popular flankers, or maybe this fragrance itself has just caught a lot of hype. Just in general, the fragrances that have had a big impact on the fragrance community, and they're all worth trying at least once. So if you guys are interested in hearing about that, please stay tuned. But first, let's roll that intro. All right, welcome back. So before we get into the main list of fragrances, I do have a quick disclosure. I am not saying in this video that these are the only 10 iconic designer fragrances worth checking out. These are just 10 iconic ones that I do have. Of course, there are more, and I could even do a part 2 to this. So before you see that I did not include a certain fragrance that you find iconic, again, I am not saying that these are the only 10. These are just the ones that I thought would be appropriate for this video. And like I said, I could certainly do a part 2, and honestly, probably even a part 3. So with that out of the way, let's get into the number 10 spot. So moving right along to the number 10 spot, we are talking about Mugler's Pure Malt. So this is either the first or second most popular flanker from this line. This and Pure Havane get a ton of love, and it's well deserved. This is a fantastic fragrance. This came out in 2009 and kind of seemed to spawn in more popularity with boozy fragrances, at least on the designer side of things. So this one has whiskey. It also has malt, which kind of contributes to that boozy accord. This doesn't come across overly alcoholic or anything like that. It's not sharp or off-putting. There definitely are fragrances out there that are a lot more boozy, but you get a nice little hint of it. It also has a little bit of smokiness from some peat, but the really appealing thing with this is the patchouli, dried fruits, and then the coffee that this fragrance has. So it almost in a way comes across edible, but it's not a gourmand quite yet. This thing just has this nice kind of sweet, creamy, bitter, smoky, slightly fruity vibe to it that is really appealing. This stuff smells fantastic. If you guys are looking for a really appealing, boozy designer fragrance that has some nice sweetness and then coffee kind of supporting it for a little bit of bitterness, just a really nice blend, this thing is worth checking out, absolutely. And again, this is a very iconic fragrance. So at the number 10 spot, that was Mugler's Pure Malt. Coming in at the number 9 spot, we're talking about a fragrance that spawned in a massive line of flankers. I want to say there's over 20 different flankers from this fragrance, and quite a few of them are actually fairly popular. One of them is considered like a massive date night fragrance, arguably the biggest date night fragrance in existence. Again, this is the original. This is what basically started it off. It's from Yves Saint Laurent, and it is L'Homme. So this fragrance, you can smell this in all the flankers, even LatinAutor L'Homme, which is a spicier, darker, more date night oriented take on this fragrance. And that was the fragrance, by the way, I was talking about for date nights that's really popular. But again, you can smell the DNA of this one in all of them. This has a nice ginger note, and that's kind of what ties in all the L'Hommes together, at least the L'Hommes. The LatinAutor L'Homme flankers, I do not believe have ginger in them, but all of the L'Homme flankers from the original fragrance do. It's a very distinct note, and basically ginger, which you see a ton in fragrance nowadays, kind of all started here with this one. This kind of made ginger a popular note. You also have citruses here too. You even have spices, tonka bean, and then cedar. So this isn't just a super fresh, crisp, fruity fragrance. You do get some nice woodiness and then some spices and sweetness from the tonka bean. And in general, this is just a really appealing fragrance. This thing is perfect for basically any situation you can think of. This would definitely work as a date night fragrance, but this is great for the office. This is a great casual fragrance too. It's very versatile, and this is one you guys should definitely check out if you have not tried it, just to see where everything started at for this line. So again, the number 9 spot, that was Yves Saint Laurent's L'Homme. So coming in at the number 8 spot, we have a super iconic fragrance from 1996. The perfumer behind this fragrance basically kickstarted his career by creating this, and now he's one of the most well-known perfumers in existence. This is from Jean Paul Gaultier, and it's called Le Male. So this thing, it's super classic. It seemed like in the late 90s, early 2000s, this is all anybody wore. This is right up there with Acqua di Gio as far as just popularity, especially, 20 years ago. It's a modern barbershop fragrance. So you have lavender, you also have some mint and then vanilla. So you get a nice kind of refreshing sweetness from that mint. The vanilla is a very sweet, creamy vanilla. And then of course that lavender gives you that kind of nice floral aromatic touch. This is a masterpiece of a fragrance. It has been reformulated a few times, so it is a lot weaker nowadays. Not the best on performance, but you can spray it heavy, it's not that expensive, and it still does smell great. And additionally, there's quite a few fragrances, including some niche fragrances, that got inspirations from this. Point being, Parfums de Marly Pegasus, even Amouage Reflection Man, for example, those all share similarities to this one, but this is the OG, this is what started it all. This thing smells fantastic, and I think it is still relevant nowadays. So if you guys want to see what started it all off for this line of fragrances, check this one out. So again, number 8 spot, that was Jean Paul Gaultier Le Male. So next, at the number 7 spot, we do have a vetiver dominant fragrance. Now on the designer side of things, we are seeing quite a few vetiver fragrances, or at least fragrances that use vetiver as a dominant note nowadays. And I think a lot of that can be contributed to the creation of this fragrance, as well as the popularity of this fragrance. It's from Hermes, and it's called Terre d'Hermes, just the Eau de Toilette. So this is a nice citrus forward vetiver fragrance, and the dominant citrus note here is actually orange. You do get a little bit of grapefruit supporting it, but front and center is that orange, and you can definitely detect it. Also, of course, that vetiver is quite strong. Here it comes across kind of like a lightly dirty kind of haze smelling vetiver, so not overly woody. You also do get some spices like black pepper, then even some patchouli supporting this fragrance. So it does have a nice blend of different notes, but for me, it's mostly about that vetiver and that orange. Some people kind of describe this almost as like an orange cleaner, like a, you know, like a spray bottle cleaner. I don't quite find that to be the case, but I can maybe understand where some people are coming from. I think it just kind of, that's coming from how the vetiver is pushed forward in this fragrance, how it kind of shows itself. But I think this is a great smelling fragrance. And again, this thing is iconic. It's worth trying at least once. This fragrance, as well as most of these on this list, if not all, you can find at your local Ultas and Sephoras. So you can go in there and just do a test spray and at least see how it smells. So I think you guys should definitely do that for this one. Again, at the number 7 spot, that was Terre d'Hermes Eau de Toilette. So next, at the number 6 spot, we do have an iconic fragrance from 1988. This is a fragrance that stands alone as far as its scent profile. There's nothing else out there that smells like it except for its flankers, of course. If you've smelled this fragrance once and you smell it again, you know which fragrance it is instantly. It's from Dior, and it is Fahrenheit. So this is a true man's fragrance. This thing is just extremely potent. It has a very dominant violet leaf note, which, if you don't know violet leaf, in general, it kind of comes across like diesel or petrol, like gasoline. So just like a fossil fuel, basically, very dark and harsh. You also have leather in here. You have a lot of woody notes. There are some citruses and spices as well, but you don't get too much of that. This thing comes across just very dark, harsh, and manly, but I love this fragrance still. I think it smells great. This is somewhat of a classy fragrance, not something you're going to wear ultra dressed down. But even if you don't like this kind of fragrance, or just from that note breakdown and description, you don't think you would like it, again, this is so iconic. You guys need to go to an Ulta, go to a Sephora, and just try this at least once for yourself. And hey, you might even end up liking it. So I love this stuff a ton, and you guys might too. So again, at the number 6 spot, that was Dior Fahrenheit. So coming in at the number 5 spot, we do have a nice date night or winter fragrance. It's from Armani, and it is Armani Code Absolu. So this thing to me smells absolutely fantastic. I remember about probably 2 years ago at this point, I got one of those sample kits that they give you at Sephora, where basically it's like 10, 15 different samples, and then you get a coupon inside, and whichever fragrance from the samples you enjoyed the most, you can redeem the coupon for a bottle. This was the fragrance that I ended up redeeming. This thing blew me away, and I knew I needed to have it. This thing has a nice, sweet kind of root beer / creamy kind of vibe to it, almost like a root beer float. You have vanilla in here, you have nutmeg, you have tonka bean, even some suede, and then there's some mandarin orange. So this thing, it's just super appealing. It basically, the best way to say it is, again, it just smells like a root beer float. There is a little bit more to it than that, but this thing is just super appealing, very, very sweet, So you have to like sweet fragrances to enjoy this, but this is just a genre of fragrance that is quite popular nowadays. This thing is quite similar to Profumo, and Profumo did come first of the two of these, but I actually prefer this to Profumo. So if you guys were to check something out from this line, I think this is the one to look at. So again, the number 5 spot, that was Armani Code Absolute. So at the number 4 spot, we do have a recently discontinued fragrance. You can still find this on the cheap end as far as discounters go, and I believe this is still at retailers as well. So you guys can still definitely go at least test it before buying it. It's from Hugo Boss, and it is Boss Bottled Intense. So I included this in my video that I posted the other day, I believe, as well as a discontinued fragrances video I made. So I don't want to get super in depth with this, but basically here you get a nice fresh woody apple pie. So you got some citruses, orange blossom, some woody notes, but you also have cinnamon, cloves, green apple, and then vanilla. And I believe there's even some cardamom in here. So it's sweet, spicy, fruity, and then woody. This thing smells fantastic. This DNA is quite iconic. Whether you think you've smelled this or not, you probably have on somebody else. And this thing is just a great, well-rounded fragrance. It sucks that they discontinued the intense version. At least they still have the eau de toilette. So again, at the number 4 spot, that was Hugo Boss Bottled Intense. At the number 3 spot, we have a very spicy fragrance. This thing is well known for being a great winter fragrance. It's from Viktor & Rolf, and it is called Spicebomb Extreme. So this is actually a fragrance, or at least the original, the eau de toilette. It's a fragrance that I've had since 2013. I bought that on release, and that was well before I went down this fragrance rabbit hole where I was collecting, and then of course, you know, getting into the groups and stuff. When I only had a few fragrances, the original Spice Bomb was one of them. And now I have the Extreme. Unfortunately, I did sell off my vintage bottle of Spice Bomb eau de toilette, and I do regret that. But to me, this stuff here is great still, great performance. This thing is super heavy on the spices, in particular black pepper. You also get vanilla, tobacco, and lavender. So very sweet. The tobacco here is not a harsh lit cigarette kind of tobacco. It's a nice, sweeter, like aged leaf tobacco, I guess you could say. It smells absolutely fantastic. Whether it's this one or the eau de toilette, you guys need to check it out. This thing is super iconic. It's a great winter fragrance. It lasts a decent amount of time as well. So again, at the number 3 spot, that was Viktor & Rolf's Spice Bomb Extreme. So coming in at the number 2 spot, we do have another fragrance from Armani. This is a different fragrance line from the Code line. We are talking about the Acqua di Gio line, and the fragrance I'm referring to is Profumo. So, I mean, come on guys, we all know this fragrance. This thing smells fantastic. Acqua di Gio was actually my first fragrance I ever got. And up until last year, I still had my original bottle, which was from, I wanna say 2006 or 7. So I don't know if that's considered vintage because it might have already been through a reformulation at that point. But I will say that the bottle I had smells not quite the same as the stuff you find at the stores nowadays. I honestly think that Profumo smells more similar to the bottle I had than the current formulations of the eau de toilette. This thing just smells absolutely fantastic. It's a nice aquatic citrusy fragrance. You do have sea notes and citruses, but you also get some nice incense and patchouli in this one, which makes it just a little bit darker and more mature. This thing is so iconic. Probably the most iconic fragrance on this list as far as just a fragrance line goes, but you guys need to try this at least once. And you probably have, but for the few of you that have not, go to an Ulta or Sephora, a Macy's, whatever, ask for a sample of this or even just do a test spray. You guys need to try this if you have not. So again, at the number 2 spot, that was Armani Acqua di Gio Profumo. And finally at the number 1 spot, we do have a fragrance from Chanel. Can you guess which one it is? It is Bleu de Chanel. So this thing I am gonna throw out there and say that this is the most iconic fragrance in recent history. And by that, I mean in the last 20 years or so. This whole blue fragrance craze we see nowadays is because of the Bleu de Chanel line. Fragrances like Dior Sauvage, Versace Dylan Blue, Bulgari Aqua Atlantique, and you know, the 20 others that have already come out. They're all inspired by this fragrance right here. All these fragrances are just about mass appeal and versatility. This thing, it's full of citruses, aldehydes, incense, and then amberwood. Amberwood and citruses, as well as incense in most places, and ambroxan kind of seem to be the theme of these blue fragrances. Amberwood is a more woody take on ambroxan, and then of course ambroxan is just an aroma chemical version of ambergris. So a lot of these fragrances utilize them. They do smell great, but they're not ultra unique. And certainly this one is, you know, that case as well. To me, this just smells like basically a shower gel, a nice fancy shower gel, I guess you could say. But it does smell fantastic, you can't deny it, and the impact that this fragrance has had on the fragrance world is immense. So again, at the #1 spot, that was Chanel's Bleu de Chanel. Well, there you go. Those are my 10 iconic designer fragrances. If you're newer to the fragrance community, you're just kind of dipping your toes into this world, these are ones that you guys want to start with and at least try. That way you can kind of get a feel for all these different genres of fragrance and see what they're all about. If you guys enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate dropping a like just to show your support, and then that way more people can see my videos on YouTube. If you guys want to write a comment as well, just letting me know your thoughts, as well as some new video ideas and topics, that would be great too. And since you're down there doing all that stuff, if you have not already, if you could subscribe and hit the bell notification, that would be great. That way you stay up to date on new videos whenever they get released going forward. But with all that out of the way, that's all I really have for you guys today. So I hope you have a good one. Stay healthy, stay wealthy, and smell great.